The wolves would kill her. That was the point. Ilara knew it the moment her stepmother pressed the rusted bucket into her hands, a cruel smile playing at her lips. The Lycan King's wolves need their cages cleaned. You'll do it? No servant had survived that task in years. The wolves were feral, massive beasts kept in the eastern kennels of the castle, not Lycans themselves, but the wild companions of the wolf shifters, and they tolerated no human presence. 3 servants had been mauled this year alone. Ilara was meant to be the 4th. "Of course, my lady," she said, because what else could she say? She was nothing. An orphan taken in by her father's second wife after his death, kept as unpaid labour for 7 years. She slept in the cellar. She ate scraps. She existed only because killing her outright would have raised questions. This was cleaner, an accident, a tragic mauling. Her stepmother would weep at the funeral, if they bothered to hold one. Ilara walked through the castle grounds as the sun began its descent, the bucket heavy in her grip. She'd always been small, too thin, too quiet, too forgettable. Her stepsisters called her the ghost because she moved through the household unseen, unheard, unclaimed. Maybe it's better this way, she thought, as the kennels came into view. At least it will be quick. The eastern kennels were a stone structure set apart from the main castle, and even from a distance she could hear them. Low growls, the scrape of claws on stone. The wolves knew someone was coming. Ilara's hands trembled as she approached the iron gate. Through the bars, she could see them. 6 enormous wolves, each one the size of a small horse, with eyes that gleamed gold in the fading light. They paced their enclosures with predatory focus, hackles raised. "They're beautiful," she thought, and then immediately felt foolish. Beautiful things could still kill you. Beautiful things often did. She set down her bucket, took a breath, reached for the latch. The first wolf lunged at the bars the moment the gate swung open, and Ilara stumbled backward, a scream caught in her throat. But the beast stopped short, its massive head tilting, its nostrils flared. It sniffed the air once, twice, and then, impossibly, it sat down. Ilara stared. The wolf stared back, its golden eyes no longer wild but curious, assessing. The growling from the other enclosures quieted. One by one, the other wolves stopped pacing. They turned toward her with that same strange attention. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to run. Instead, she took a step forward. The nearest wolf, the one who had lunged, lowered its great head and whined. A soft, submissive sound that made no sense. These wolves submitted to no one except, "Don't. Move." The voice came from behind her, low and commanding, and Ilara froze. Not because she was told to, but because something in that voice reached into her chest and squeezed. Footsteps approached. Slow. Deliberate. She could feel him before she saw him. A presence so vast it seemed to fill the entire space, pressing against her skin like heat from a fire. Then he stepped into her peripheral vision, and Ilara forgot how to breathe. The Lycan King was enormous. He towered over her, broad-shouldered and powerful, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the colour of molten amber. Those eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to fold in on herself. His jaw was hard, his expression unreadable, and when he spoke again, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Who sent you here?" Ilara's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She'd never been this close to the king. She'd seen him from afar, everyone had. But standing before him now, she understood why people whispered about him with fear in their voices. He wasn't just powerful, he was power itself, contained in human form. I, she swallowed hard. I was sent to clean the cages, Your Majesty. His eyes narrowed. By whom? My stepmother, Lady Varan. Something shifted in his expression. A muscle ticked in his jaw. He looked at the wolves, who remained utterly calm, then back at her. Do you know why you're still alive? Ilara shook her head, not trusting her voice. The king moved closer. 1 step. 2. The wolves didn't react. If anything, they seemed to press toward the bars of their enclosures, eager to be near. Her? Near him? She couldn't tell. And he stopped when he was close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. Close enough that she could smell him. Pine and wood smoke, and something wild underneath. These wolves, he said quietly, have killed every human who's entered this kennel for the past decade. They tolerate only me and my inner circle. They are bound to my bloodline, to my pack. He paused, and his gaze dropped to her throat, then lower, then back to her face. They should have torn you apart the moment you opened that gate. Ilara's heart pounded. I don't understand. Neither do I. His voice had gone rough. Except that there's only one reason they wouldn't hurt you. One reason they'd submit to a stranger. What reason? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he raised his hand, slowly, as if approaching a wild animal, and touched her cheek. Ilara gasped. Heat flooded through her at the contact, and she heard the wolves whine again, a chorus of soft sounds that seemed almost approving. The king's expression shifted. The hard mask cracked, just slightly, and underneath she saw something that looked almost like wonder. You're mine, he murmured, more to himself than to her. Mate. The word hit her like a physical blow. Mate. She knew what that meant. Every human in the Lycan kingdoms knew. Fated pairs, bound by something deeper than choice. The other half of a Lycan's soul. That's not possible, she whispered. I'm nobody. You're mine. He said it differently this time. Not wondering, but certain. Fierce. His thumb traced along her cheekbone and she shivered. That's why they didn't touch you. The bond. They sensed it before either of us did. Ilara's mind raced. This had to be a mistake. She was a servant, an orphan. She cleaned floors and emptied chamber pots and slept on a pile of straw in a cellar. She wasn't anyone's mate, least of all the Lycan kings. My stepmother sent me here to die, she said, because it was the only thing she could think to say. The king's expression went cold. Not at her. She understood that immediately, but at the mention of her stepmother, at the confession of what had been intended. Did she? He said quietly. It wasn't a question. The wolves always kill servants. Everyone knows. She wanted... Ilara stopped, her voice catching. Saying it out loud made it more real, more terrible. She wanted me gone. For a long moment, the king said nothing. His hand remained on her cheek, warm and steady. Behind him, the wolves had settled completely now, lying down in their enclosures, with their massive heads resting on their paws, watching the scene with patient eyes. Then he spoke, and his voice was gentle in a way she hadn't expected. Gentle in a way no one had spoken to her in 7 years. What's your name? Ilara. Ilara. He repeated it like he was tasting the sound. You won't be cleaning cages, Ilara. You won't be sleeping in whatever hole they've kept you in. And you won't be going anywhere near Lady Varan ever again. She blinked at him, uncomprehending. I don't. You're the king's mate. The corner of his mouth lifted, just slightly. That means you're under my protection now, and I protect what's mine. Ilara stared at him, waiting for the trick, the cruelty, the moment when this would reveal itself as another kind of trap. It didn't come. The king, her mate, offered her his hand. "Come with me," he said. "We have much to discuss." She took his hand. Ilara didn't know why. Every lesson of her life had taught her that kindness was a trap, that gentle words preceded cruelty, that hope was just another way to be hurt. But his hand was warm and steady, and something deep inside her, something she couldn't name, said yes. The king led her through the castle grounds as the last light faded from the sky. Servants stopped and stared. Guards straightened. Whispers followed them like shadows, but the king paid them no attention. His focus remained fixed ahead, though his grip on her hand never loosened. "This isn't real," Ilara told herself. "This can't be real." He brought her to the royal wing. She'd never been here before. Servants like her cleaned the lower halls, the kitchens, the cellars. The royal wing was another world entirely. Polished stone floors, tapestries that cost more than her life, chandeliers dripping with crystals that caught the torchlight and scattered it like stars. The king stopped before a set of carved wooden doors and pushed them open. The room beyond was larger than the entire cellar where she'd slept for 7 years. A massive bed dominated one wall, draped in furs and silks. A fireplace crackled with warmth. There were chairs, a writing desk, a wardrobe. More furniture than she'd ever owned. More comfort than she'd ever known. "These are your chambers," the king said. Ilara stared. "I don't understand." "What's to understand? You need a place to sleep. This is it." "But I'm—" She stopped herself. A servant. Nobody. Nothing. "This is too much." The king turned to face her fully. In the firelight, his amber eyes seemed to glow. "You're my mate, Ilara, the other half of my soul. There is no too much when it comes to you." The words should have been romantic. They should have made her heart sing. Instead, they made her want to cry. "You don't know me," she whispered. "You don't know anything about me." "Then tell me." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, like he actually wanted to know. Ilara wrapped her arms around herself. The movement was instinctive, a shield against a blow that wasn't coming. "There's nothing to tell. I'm an orphan. My father died when I was 12. His wife kept me as a servant. That's all there is. That's what happened to you. It's not who you are." She looked up at him, startled by the distinction. No one had ever separated those two things before. To everyone else, her circumstances were her identity. Poor, orphaned, servant, worthless. The king moved to a bell pulled by the door and tugged it twice. Within moments, a knock came, and he opened the door to speak with someone in low tones. Ilara caught fragments: food, bath, clothes, immediately, before he closed the door again. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Ilara had to think about it. "This morning, a piece of bread." Something flickered across his face. Anger, maybe, but not at her. "And before that?" "The same. Yesterday morning." The king was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. "1 meal a day, bread only." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "For how long?" "Since my father died. 7 years." Another silence. Longer this time. The king crossed to the fireplace and stood with his back to her, one hand braced against the mantel. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the rigid line of his spine. When he finally turned around, his expression was calm, but his eyes burned. "That ends tonight," he said. "You'll eat 3 meals a day. Real food, as much as you want." "Your Majesty?" "Kale." She blinked. "What?" "My name. It's Kale." He moved closer, and his voice softened. "You're not my subject, Ilara. You're my equal, my partner. You don't call me Your Majesty. You call me by my name." "Partner." The word felt foreign on her tongue, even unspoken. She'd never been anyone's partner. She'd been a burden, an inconvenience, a ghost, but never a partner. A knock at the door interrupted them. Servants entered bearing trays of food: roasted meat, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, a flagon of wine. They set everything on the table by the window and departed with bowed heads, casting curious glances at Ilara as they left. Kale gestured to the table. "Eat." Ilara approached the food slowly, as if it might vanish if she moved too fast. The smell alone was overwhelming, rich and warm and real. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but she hesitated. "It's not a trick," Kyle said quietly. He'd read her fear. Of course he had. "There are no conditions, no price. Just eat." She sat. She reached for the bread first. Familiar, safe, but then stopped herself. 3 meals a day, he'd said. Real food. She took a piece of meat instead. The first bite nearly made her cry. It was hot and tender and seasoned with herbs she couldn't name. She couldn't remember the last time she'd tasted anything but stale bread and thin soup. She ate slowly at first, then faster, until she caught herself and forced her hands to still. Kyle had taken a seat across from her, but he wasn't eating. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize. Not for eating, not for being hungry." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "You never have to apologize for having needs, Ilara. Not with me." She didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever told her that her needs mattered. No one had ever suggested that she deserved to have them met. "Why are you being so kind to me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. She regretted it immediately. What if he changed his mind? What if this was the moment the mask came off? But Kale only looked at her with those steady amber eyes. "Because you're my mate. Because you deserve kindness. Because someone should have been kind to you a long time ago, and they weren't. And that—" He stopped, took a breath. "That ends now." Ilara felt something crack inside her chest. A wall she'd built so carefully, brick by brick, over 7 long years. It didn't crumble, not yet. But a fissure had appeared. Light was seeping through. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I don't know how to be whatever you need me to be. I don't need you to be anything except yourself. I don't know who that is anymore." Kyle reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The touch was gentle, warm, patient. "Then we'll figure it out together," he said. "There's no rush. We have time." Ilara looked at their hands, his so large and strong, hers so small and scarred from years of labor. Such different hands, such different lives. And yet somehow fate had drawn a line between them. She didn't trust it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But for the first time in 7 years, she wanted to. The nightmare came on the 3rd night. Ilara woke with a scream caught in her throat. her body drenched in cold sweat. The cellar. She'd been back in the cellar, locked in the dark while her stepsisters laughed above her. The walls had been closing in, the air growing thin, and no matter how hard she pounded on the door, no one came. No one ever came. She sat up in the massive bed, gasping for breath. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the unfamiliar room. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory returned. The wolves, the king, the impossible revelation, and she pressed a hand to her racing heart. Safe, she told herself. You're safe. But her body didn't believe it. 7 years of fear couldn't be erased in 3 days. A knock at the door made her flinch. Ilara? Kael's voice, low with concern. She should tell him she was fine. She should send him away. Instead, she heard herself say, "Come in." The door opened, and he stood there in the dim light, wearing only loose trousers, his chest bare. He must have been sleeping, or trying to. His dark hair was dishevelled, his amber eyes alert despite the hour. "I heard you cry out," he said. "Are you hurt?" "No, just a nightmare." She pulled the furs tighter around herself, embarrassed by her weakness. "I'm sorry I woke you." He crossed the room without hesitation and sat on the edge of her bed. Close, but not too close, giving her space while still being present. "Don't apologize. Tell me about it." "It's nothing. Just memories." "Memories of what?" Ilara looked away. The fire crackled softly. Outside, she could hear the distant howl of wolves, the real ones, the wild ones in the kennels. They'd been calm around her every time she visited, pressing against the bars for her touch, whining when she left. Kael said it was the bond. She still wasn't sure she believed him. "The cellar," she finally said, "where I slept. Sometimes they would lock me in. For punishment." Kael went very still. "What kind of punishment?" "If I broke something. If I was too slow. If I looked at them wrong." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. There was always a reason, or no reason at all. Sometimes my stepmother just wanted to remind me of my place. "How long would they leave you there?" "A day, usually. Once it was 3. She could still feel it. The cold stone floor, the complete darkness, the gnawing hunger and desperate thirst. "I thought I would die. I prayed I would die. But I didn't." The silence stretched between them. When Ilara finally looked at Kyle, his expression made her breath catch. Not pity. She'd expected pity. This was something else. Something fiercer. His jaw was clenched, his hands fisted at his sides, and his amber eyes had taken on a faint glow that wasn't entirely human. "Kale? I want to kill them." His voice was rough, barely controlled. "I want to tear them apart for what they did to you." The words should have frightened her. This was the Lycan king, after all, a predator capable of violence she couldn't imagine. But instead of fear, she felt something else entirely. Something warm and unfamiliar. Someone was angry on her behalf. Someone cared that she had suffered. "They're not worth it," she said quietly. "You're worth it." He turned to face her fully, and the glow in his eyes softened. "You're worth everything, Ilara. I need you to understand that." "I don't." "You've been told you're nothing for so long that you believe it. I can see it in the way you move, the way you apologize for existing, the way you flinch when someone raises their voice." He reached out, slowly, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "But they were wrong. All of them. They looked at you and saw someone to use, someone to break. They were blind. Ilara's eyes burned. What do you see? I see someone who survived. His thumb brushed her cheek, catching a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. I see strength, resilience, a heart that's still capable of kindness despite every reason to be bitter. I see my mate, the woman I've waited 300 years for. 300 years. The number hit her like a physical weight. She kept forgetting how old he was, how long he'd lived. To him, her 19 years were nothing. A blink. "How can you be so sure?" she whispered. "How do you know I'm really your mate, and not just some mistake?" Kale's expression shifted. The fierceness faded, replaced by something tender, something vulnerable. "Do you know what it feels like?" he asked. "The mate bond?" She shook her head. "It's like being incomplete your whole life and not knowing it until suddenly you're whole. Like a constant ache you've grown so used to that you forgot it was there. Until it stops." He took her hand and pressed it to his chest, over his heart. She could feel it beating, strong and steady. "The moment I saw you in that kennel, the moment I caught your scent, everything went quiet. 300 years of waiting, and there you were, covered in dirt, terrified, expecting to die. And all I could think was, finally." Ilara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. His heart pulsed beneath her palm, and she realized hers had synchronized with it, beat for beat, as if they were already one. "I don't know how to be what you need," she said, her voice cracking. "You already are." He lifted her hand from his chest and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was gentle, reverent. "You don't have to be anything more than exactly who you are. I'm not asking you to change. I'm asking you to let me love you." Love. The word hung in the air between them. "You don't love me," Ilara said. "You don't even know me." "I know you're brave. You walked into those kennels expecting to die, and you did it anyway. I know you're kind. The servants talk about how you helped them even when you had nothing, shared your bread when you were starving. I know you're strong, because you're still here after everything they did to you." He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. "I know enough. And I want to learn the rest." Ilara's heart was pounding. He was so close. She could feel the heat of him, smell that wild scent of pine and wood smoke. His amber eyes held hers, and she saw no deception in them, no cruelty. Only honesty, only want, only hope. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know. I don't know how to trust anyone." "I know that too." His hand came up to cup her face, his touch achingly gentle. "We'll go slow as you need." "I'm not going anywhere, Ilara. I've waited 300 years. I can wait a little longer." She should pull away. She should protect herself. She should remember that hope was just another way to be hurt. But his hand was warm on her cheek, and his eyes were soft, and for the first time in her life, someone was looking at her like she mattered, like she was precious, like she was worth waiting for. Ilara leaned into his touch, just slightly, a surrender so small it was almost nothing. But Kyle saw it. His breath caught. And when he smiled, a real smile, warm and wondering, something in her chest cracked wide open. She was falling for him. She knew it with terrifying certainty, and she had no idea how to stop. Lady Varen came on the 5th day. Ilara was in the kennels when she heard the commotion. Raised voices near the castle gates, the clatter of hooves, the sharp bark of guards demanding identification. She'd been sitting with the wolves, her back against the bars, while the largest of them, a silver-furred beast she'd named Storm, pressed his massive head into her lap. The wolves had become her refuge. They asked nothing of her, expected nothing. They simply accepted her presence with a contentment that felt almost like love. But the moment the shouting began, Storm's head lifted. His ears flattened. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "What is it?" Ilara murmured. "What's wrong?" Then she heard her stepmother's voice, shrill and demanding, cutting through the morning air. "I don't care who she claims to be. That girl is my property. She belongs to me." Ilara's blood turned to ice. She scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering. Through the kennel gates, she could see the courtyard. And there, dismounting from a fine carriage, was Lady Varen. Her stepsisters flanked her, their faces twisted with outrage. Behind them stood a man Ilara didn't recognize, tall and thin with cold eyes. No. No, no, no. She should hide. She should run to Kale. She should do something other than stand frozen like a rabbit before a hawk. But her feet wouldn't move. 7 years of conditioning held her in place, whispering the old familiar lies. "You're nothing. You're worthless. You belong to them." "There you are." Lady Varen's voice cut through the fog of her fear. Her stepmother had spotted her through the kennel gates, and now she strode forward with the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything in her life. "Did you think you could hide from me? Did you think spreading your legs for the king would save you?" Lady Varen's lip curled. "You're still bound to my household. I have the papers. You belong to me until your debt is paid." Ilara's mouth went dry. "Debt? For raising you, for feeding you, for keeping you alive when I could have thrown you into the streets." Lady Varen smiled, and it was the cruelest expression Ilara had ever seen. "Did you think kindness was free? You owe me 7 years of labor, girl, and I've come to collect." The thin man stepped forward, unrolling a scroll. "By the laws of the kingdom, any person indebted to a household may be reclaimed by— She owes you nothing." Kael's voice rang across the courtyard like thunder. Ilara turned to see him striding from the castle, his expression carved from stone. He was dressed simply. Black trousers, a white shirt open at the collar, but there was nothing simple about the power radiating from him. The guards parted before him. Even the wolves in the kennels fell silent. This was not the gentle man who had held her through her nightmares. This was the Lycan king. And he was furious. Lady Varen's confidence flickered. "Your Majesty, I meant no disrespect. But this girl is my mate." The words fell like a hammer blow. Lady Varen's face went white. Her stepsisters gasped. The thin man with the scroll took a step backward, as if proximity to Ilara had suddenly become dangerous. That's not possible," Lady Varen stammered. "She's human. She's nobody. She's mine." Kael stopped beside Ilara, and his hand found hers. The touch steadied her, anchored her. "She has been mine since the moment she set foot in this castle. Any claim you think you have is void. But the debt? There is no debt." Kael's voice dropped to a growl that wasn't entirely human. "You starved her, beat her, locked her in a cellar like an animal. You sent her to clean the wolves' kennels, hoping they would tear her apart." His amber eyes blazed. "You have no claim to her. You have nothing but my mercy. And that is running thin." Lady Varen's mouth opened and closed. For the first time in Ilara's memory, her stepmother had no words, no sharp retorts, no cruel dismissals. She stood in the courtyard of the Lycan king's castle, and she was afraid. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, Ilara felt only tired. Tired of the fear. Tired of the running. Tired of waiting for the next blow to fall. "She can leave," Ilara said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "Let her go." She met Kael's eyes, and something passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. "She's not worth your anger. She's not worth anything. Just let her leave." For a long moment, Kael held her gaze. Then, slowly, the tension in his shoulders eased. The glow faded from his eyes. He turned back to Lady Varin with an expression of cold dismissal. "You heard her. Leave. And know this. If you ever come near her again, if you ever speak her name, if you ever so much as think about her, I will end you. Not as a king, as a mate protecting what's his." Lady Varin fled. There was no other word for it. She gathered her daughters and her lawyer and scrambled back to her carriage with none of the dignity she'd arrived with. The gates closed behind her, and she was gone. Ilara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Are you all right?" She turned to find Kael watching her with concern. All trace of the fearsome king vanished. In his place was the man who had fed her, comforted her, waited for her. "I think so," she said. I thought she would always have power over me. I thought I'd never be free of her." "You are now." He lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "You're free, Ilara. You can do anything you want. Go anywhere you want. Be anyone you want." The words hit her strangely. She'd been so focused on surviving that she'd never thought about what came after. What did she want? Who did she want to be? She looked at Kael, at his steady amber eyes, his patient expression, his hand wrapped around hers like she was something precious. She knew exactly what she wanted. "I want to stay," she said. "With you. Not because I have nowhere else to go. Not because you're the king. Because I—" She faltered, her courage wavering. "Because I choose you." Kyle went very still. "Say that again." "I choose you." The words came easier this time, stronger. "I'm terrified, and I don't know how to do this, and I'm probably going to mess everything up. But I don't want to run anymore. I don't want to hide. I want to be here. With you. If you'll have me." Something broke open in his expression. The careful control he'd maintained, the patience, the restraint. It all fell away, and underneath was raw, desperate hope. "If I'll have you," he repeated, his voice rough. "Ilara, I've wanted you since the moment I saw you. I've been holding myself back because I didn't want to frighten you, didn't want to push you before you were ready. But if you're telling me you choose this, choose me." "I am." He moved. One moment they were standing apart. The next, his hands were cupping her face, tilting it up toward his. His amber eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for hesitation, finding none. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his lips a breath away from hers. "Tell me to stop, and I will." "Don't stop." He kissed her. It was nothing like she'd imagined. It was better. His lips were warm and firm, demanding and gentle at once. He kissed her like she was air and he was drowning. He kissed her like he'd been waiting 300 years for this exact moment. Maybe he had. Ilara melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. The mate bond flared between them, a warmth that spread through her chest, her limbs, her entire being. She could feel him now, not just his body pressed against hers, but his soul, his joy, his overwhelming, desperate love. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Mine, Kale growled against her lips. You're mine, Ilara. Yours, she agreed. And you're mine. He smiled, that real smile, the one that transformed his face from fearsome to beautiful. Always, he said, for the rest of my very long life. Always. The wedding was held beneath a full moon. It was tradition, Kyle explained. Lycan mates bonded under the moon's light, witnessed by pack and wolves alike. The ceremony would seal what fate had already decided, bind their souls together for eternity. Ilara stood before the mirror in her chambers, hardly recognizing the woman who stared back at her. The gown was silver silk, fitted to her body like it had been made for her. Because it had been. Kale had commissioned it the day after she'd chosen him, and the royal seamstresses had worked through the nights to finish it in time. 1 month, she thought. 1 month ago, I was sleeping in a cellar. Now she was about to become a queen. A knock at the door. My lady, it's time. Ilara took a breath, smoothed her hands over the silk, and walked out to meet her future. The great courtyard had been transformed. Thousands of candles flickered in the darkness, their light mingling with the silver glow of the moon overhead. The entire pack had gathered, Lycans in human form, standing in respectful silence, their eyes reflecting gold in the candlelight. And at the edges of the crowd, watching with patient attention, sat the wolves. All 6 of them had been released from their kennels for the ceremony. They formed a loose circle around the altar, their massive bodies relaxed, their golden eyes fixed on Ilara as she walked down the aisle. Storm, the largest, let out a soft whine as she passed. She reached out without thinking and brushed her fingers across his silver fur. He pressed into her touch, and she heard murmurs ripple through the crowd. She touches them. She heard someone whisper. The wolves let her touch them. Because she's his, another voice answered. Because she's ours. Then she saw Kale, and everything else fell away. He stood at the altar in black formal clothes, his dark hair pushed back from his face, his amber eyes burning as he watched her approach. He looked like a king. He looked like a predator. He looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. She reached him, and he took her hands in his. You're beautiful, he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You're biased. Absolutely. He smiled, and it was the smile she'd come to love. Warm and wondering, and entirely hers. I'm also right. The ceremony was simple. Ancient words, spoken in the old tongue. Vows exchanged beneath the watching moon. And then, at the end, the marking. Kale's teeth grazing her neck, leaving a mark that would proclaim her as his to every Lycan who saw it. It should have hurt. Instead, it felt like coming home. When it was done, Kyle raised their joined hands to the crowd. Your queen, he announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard. My mate, Ilara. The pack howled. It rose from 1,000 throats at once, a sound of celebration, of acceptance, of welcome. The wolves joined in, their voices deeper and wilder, harmonizing with their Lycan kin. The sound washed over Ilara like a wave, and she felt tears prick her eyes. This is real, she thought. This is actually real. She was no longer an orphan, no longer a servant, no longer nothing. She was queen. She was mate. She was loved. The celebration lasted until dawn. There was feasting and dancing and more laughter than Ilara had heard in her entire life. Pack members approached her throughout the night. Some shy, some bold, all of them welcoming. They bowed to her, called her queen, treated her with a respect she was still learning to accept. But the best part came later, when the crowds had dispersed and she and Kyle retreated to their chambers. He was gentle with her, patient. He touched her like she was precious, kissed her like she was sacred. And when they finally came together, the mate bond blazed between them, a connection so deep and complete that Alara couldn't tell where she ended and he began. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the great bed, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I love you," he said quietly. The words settled into her heart like seeds taking root. "I love you too," she whispered back, and she meant it. For the first time in her life, she meant it. 6 months later, word reached the castle about Lady Varen. It came through the gossip channels. Servants who had heard from merchants who had heard from travellers. The story spread through the castle like wildfire, and by the time it reached Ilara, half the pack was already buzzing with it. Lady Varen had been ruined. It had started slowly. Merchants who had once extended her credit began demanding immediate payment. Invitations to society events stopped arriving. Her daughters' suitors withdrew their interest, one by one. The family's fortune, which had never been as vast as Lady Varen pretended, crumbled under the weight of debts and declining trade. No one would say why, exactly. No one would point to a specific cause. But everyone knew. You didn't try to harm the Lycan queen and walk away unscathed. "Did you do this?" Ilara asked Kyle that evening, as they walked through the castle gardens. The wolves padded alongside them. They rarely left her side now, and she'd stopped questioning it. Kale's expression was carefully neutral. "I may have mentioned to a few key merchants that Lady Varen's business practices were questionable, and that any association with her household might be viewed unfavorably by the crown. Kale. She tried to kill you, Ilara." His voice hardened. "She starved you for 7 years and then sent you to be torn apart by wolves. I let her walk away with her life. That was more mercy than she deserved." Ilara should have felt guilty. She should have felt something like pity for the woman who had raised her, however cruelly. Instead, she felt only a quiet, fierce satisfaction. "Thank you," she said. Kyle looked at her, surprised. "You're not angry?" "No." She slipped her hand into his, lacing their fingers together. "I spent 7 years being told I was worthless, being treated like I didn't matter, being reminded every single day that I was nothing." She looked up at him, and she knew her eyes were fierce. "I'm done feeling sorry for people who hurt me. I'm done making myself small so they feel big." She made her choices. Now she lives with them. Kyle's expression shifted. Pride, admiration, love. "There she is," he murmured. "There's my queen." He kissed her, right there in the garden, with the wolves watching and the moon rising overhead. And Ilara kissed him back with everything she had. She'd come to this castle expecting to die. She'd walked into those kennels with nothing, no hope, no future, no reason to believe tomorrow would be any different from yesterday. But the wolves hadn't killed her. The king hadn't used her. And somewhere along the way, the broken girl who slept in a cellar had become a woman who stood in the light. She was Ilara, queen of the Lycans, mate of the king, beloved by wolves and man alike. And she had never been happier. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. More Lycan King romances are coming soon. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.